You are tuned in to another edition of Americana Music Profiles, brought to you by Americana Rhythm Music Magazine and AmericanaMusicMagazine.com. I'm your host, Greg Tutwiler. Let's jump right in to the next exciting interview. Little Wretches founder Robert Wagner got his start in music when he and his older cousin built guitars out of scrap plywood and 2x4s, nails, and rubber bands, writing their own songs in his cousin's basement. Fast forward a few years, Robert is now an enthusiastic songwriter and performer, sharing his version of acoustic Americana tinged with that 70s punk sound. Robert and I talk about his career and his music throughout the years on this edition of Americana Music Profiles. Hello, Robert. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Glad that you could join us today. And we are mid-November, getting some cooler air and seasons changing. Good time to get our music lined up for the indoor season. And so it's fun to get a chance to talk to you about what you guys have been up to and what you've been up to with your music. You've been at this a while, haven't you?
I have. People get sensitive about their age, but I've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
And I was part of what would have been the first wave of punk rock.
Okay.
In Pittsburgh. I'm a native of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and
yeah.
I still believe black and gold. That's my that's what I feel like is home. But I've lived out in Philly, in the Philly area. I don't live in Philly, but I've lived in the Philly area since about 2009. And but my universe still revolves around Western Pennsylvania. And the first wave of punk stuff, like in New York City, you're looking maybe 1975. In London, maybe 1977. It didn't really hit Pittsburgh till like 78, 79. So I think my first live performance, I was still, like 18, 19 years old.
Okay.
Didn't even know how to put together a microphone stand. That would have been at a little club called Phase 3. And that was, so Pittsburgh had a little punk scene that mainly revolved around college students, Carnegie Mellon students, University of Pittsburgh students. And that kind of gave people like me a light, those of us who always dreamed of being able to play in a band but didn't think it was feasible and didn't know how to get started.
Yeah.
Punk rock made that possible.
Yeah,
and so that was my entry into it. And, I've been writing ever since. In fact, I was writing for, back when I dreamt of being in a band but didn't think it was realistic. I was writing poetry and character sketches and things like that, but deep down in my heart, I was writing song lyrics.
Well, I read a neat little story about you and your cousins and making plywood 2x4 guitars, and so you've been chasing this dream for since the beginning of your life almost. Yeah.
I don't know why. I know my mom and dad both liked music, and probably most of the music that I grew up on were. And it wasn't just my mom and dad, but my aunts and uncles too. When we went to, back in those days, you would go to a cousin's house. If your mom needed a babysitter, she didn't hire a babysitter.
Right.
You went to your grandmother or your cousins, and we all had record players and a bunch of scratchy little 45 RPM vinyl, and that would be, our babysitter would be the record player, and we were very good at entertaining ourselves. When somebody told us that we needed a record contract in Jeff, we took it seriously. We copied the addresses off the little paper inner part of the vinyl records. We wrote records to RCA and Cold Gems and whatever companies.
Yeah.
We never got a reply though.
Right.
And my ninth birthday present was a guitar lesson and an acoustic guitar.
Okay.
And my cousin and I retreated into my room for like 15 minutes and came back out, serenaded the aunts and the uncles and the cousins with a little one-chord strumming, whatever it was that we made up. I think he banged on something and called it a drum, and I strummed my guitar and maybe put my fingers on the frets a little bit.
Yeah.
But I just always wanted to do it.
Yeah.
Loved it.
Is this presently, or has it been in some portion of your life, a full-time endeavor, or do you have other things that you do?
Well, I have other things that I do. It's never stopped being a full-time endeavor. In fact, if you don't do it full-time, you're never really going to accomplish anything with it. But typically, I'm pretty smart. I hated school when I was growing up, but I've always been a good student.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was in college, I was in an experimental program, kind of a student-directed, self-directed learning program. And so I'm good. I'm a good learner, and I know how to find resources, and I know how to find information. So any time that we had a lull in our musical activities, honestly, even going to college for me was nothing but a way to tread water. Really, all I wanted to do was play in a band,
right?
But I didn't know anybody. I didn't know how to do it. So going to college was something other than going to work.
Gotcha. Okay.
I bought my first Les Paul with a student loan. But there have been times when things slowed down. It's like, oh, my, things just kind of dried up out of nowhere. No gig. People quit the band. What am I supposed to do? And the typical way to gain time would be go back to school and take some classes.
Mm-hmm.
So, I got my undergraduate degree, and then the Little Wretches took off. And then we hit kind of a lull. And, I went back to graduate school and got a master's in instruction and learning, and at the same time I was playing in the band. It was the hardest work I've ever done in my life. Full-time teaching, full-time student, and full playing in the band. But, and then, so I've been certified to teach for a long time, but the band took off like in the early 90s, like around between 1990 and 1995, it was full-time. Every now and then I'd have to pick up a little side job, but one of my side jobs in, say, the mid-'90s, late '90s, I was working for Carnegie Museums of Pittsburgh as a fundraiser, raising money for the museum. That's a noble thing to do, nice part-time job. And most of my colleagues were these little old ladies, little old rich ladies, the wives of ambassadors and the wives of, hugely successful entrepreneurs. The one lady I worked with, her parents were the founders of Point Park University. They're really successful people. Yeah. And then they'd look at me every day. They'd say, "You are wasting your life here. I see you teaching in one of those dead poet society schools."
That's cool.
So after having after hearing that for so many times, I thought, yeah, you're right. I should be teaching, but I don't see myself working in a dead poet society school with the elite. I see myself working with the outcast, and so I got a job in a residential program, working with at-risk kids, and that did take over my life for a long stretch of time because, look, the most important job any person will do will be to raise their children. I don't have children of my own, but as soon as I was put in the position of being responsible for these kids, goodbye music. I couldn't even do it anymore. And it wasn't by design. It's no Mr. Holland's Opus thing. I don't think there's anything noble in turning around on music. But once I had made a commitment to these kids, it wasn't like a part-time job that you could walk away from.
Right.
I was their surrogate father, and, if I may flatter myself because I'm not their real father, but I'm still close with a lot of the kids that I work with. And I've never really stopped doing that. I've continued to work with at-risk kids. And now with the whole COVID thing, with the lockdown, it's kind of leveled the playing field because, I'm an indie musician with an indie band. We're on the out. We had our chances to get into the big leagues. When I started, the dream was to be signed by a major label. And we had our meetings with record company presidents. We had our opportunities to pursue things. And for whatever reason, it's almost like any time we took a band photo, somebody in the band would die. The mortality rate of the Little Wretches is pretty high.
Wow.
Which is funny because I'm a cancer survivor, but I'm still here.
Yeah. Wow.
But your question was, do I do it full time? It's like I try to do it full time.
Sure.
Right now, traditionally, what you'd be doing is you'd be supporting and promoting your record by touring.
Right. Yeah.
You can't tour right now, and that kind of eats me up. So most of my performing in, say, the last decade has been solo, just myself with an acoustic guitar, or in duo or trio format.
Mm-hmm.
My songs are good vehicles. If you're a good guitar player or a good singer, you will hear my songs and say, "Ooh, I can speak through that."
Mm-hmm.
So I've always been lucky, and I've been able to attract really good musicians, or if they're not the most proficient musicians, they get the spirit of it and they put their hearts into it.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been blessed in there. On the current album, Undesirables and Anarchists, the singer with me, Rosa Palucci, is a phenomenally talented person. If she was only good at one thing, she would be world famous.
Mm.
And I'm very, very lucky to be able to have her sing with me. And we do everything from kind of edgy, punk-ish, like post-punk kind of stuff, to folky kind of stuff. Like my songs, I write the lyrics, I come up with the melodies, and I play acoustic guitar. It doesn't much matter to me who else I'm playing with. I'll turn it up if it calls for turning up. I'll play solo if it calls for playing solo. The songs stand up in any genre.
What pulled you from the hardcore punk scene into the more kind of Americana folk rock side of where it seems like you guys have landed at this point?
Yeah, well, it seems okay when I look at other, like one of the first big American punk bands was X, with John Doe and Exene Cervenka, and they both ended up playing country music.
Okay,
I think for me, you get to a point, and I'm a writer, and what I realized is there's a big difference between people who've heard your recordings and come to your shows knowing the song, and then people who are hearing you for the first time in a live setting. When the band is live and you're throwing so much information, so much lyrical information at them, and they can kind of come away with the feeling a little bit. They might catch a phrase here or a catch there, but they can't really take it all in when the music is that loud. So one, you got to find a way to turn it down, or at least not compete with the vocals. And again, we're also playing back when I was playing, because I've always been a pretty strong lyricist. So at one point in Western Pennsylvania, where we were playing most of our gigs, hardcore punk had taken over. So all of the house PA systems were set up for screamers. And I'd go in with my kind of conversational style of voice, and he'd come off stage and people would say, "And I couldn't hear a word you said." And I said, "Well, if you couldn't hear a word I said, why did you tell me at the beginning of the set? Because the monitor sounded great." So you just had to find another way to get it across. So one way to get it across is to turn the guitars down. So it was a learning process. So for me with the Little Wretches, it was like, okay, I have the vocals, and I can support it with the acoustic guitar. I'll come up with a high part for a violin or a flute or an electric guitar that'll kind of run counter. So there's a high part, there's a low part, there's the groove, and then there's the lyric. And generally, I wish I was a piano player, but I'm not. So I got to do what I can on an acoustic guitar. But it was just trying to get the stories across.
Sure.
And that's the other thing that I kind of became aware of is as it got to where we're in our 30s, that rock star thing hasn't materialized yet. Our dedicated fans are now starting to have families of their own, so they're not coming around as much. And just generationally speaking, 30-year-olds are not going to appeal to 15-year-olds.
Right.
Younger people are going to look for a different look, a different sound.
Right.
So, we had to find a way to keep it alive. And for me, it's like, okay, I have stories to tell. I'm a writer. I teach through storytelling. I tell stories through songs. And I have to find a way. And so it just naturally drifted into that folk thing.
Yeah.
But, when the Little Wretches first started, part of our repertoire were a bunch of old folk songs.
Okay.
So it's always been a part of what we do.
And the new record, Undesirables and Anarchists, is that out? Are you releasing singles? How accessible is that?
We've hired a publicist who's working the songs. I think we're on like 80 radio stations right now.
Yeah, okay.
We've gotten a pretty strong response in South Africa. At one point, we were on the indie. I think we're still in the top 200 in the indie charts in Europe, but we were like maybe in the 90s at the high point. So now I think he's pushing another song. I don't even think too much about that stuff. If I was able to tour, if I was actually able to perform, I feel like I could be having a greater impact with it, because what I would be doing is every radio station that is playing the song, I'd be booking gigs in those cities.
Sure, of course, yeah.
Which would be giving whatever journalists are in that region a reason to want to write about it. Because, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to give people a reason to get into the band, because we are the type of band that you can get into. It's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but my hope is that there's going to be something on this album that makes people delve in and realize, there's a whole universe in here. Here's folky stuff. Here's country-ish stuff. Here's this edgy, weird violin pop. We cover a lot of musical territory. This album, though, I've heard people compare it to like the Clash, cross between the Clash and the B-52.
A little bit of Rolling Stones in there too, I hear.
Oh, without a doubt, the Rolling Stones. I mean, there was a point in my teen years where once I made up my mind that music was the thing that made me tick. It was the Kinks, the Stones, the Who, the Beatles.
Yeah, I love that stuff.
And then the American bands, Patti Smith and Lou Reed, and the New York underground bands were the thing for me.
Yeah. So if folks want to get more into your catalog and listen to this record and maybe at least get somewhere in position to be able to find you when we can get back out like normal and start to tour again, what's the best communication method for people to get in touch?
Well, my preferred thing, I wish people would come to our website, littlewretches.com. There's no just littlewretches.com, and sign up on the mailing list or post a comment or something for one of the blogs.
Okay.
We're on Facebook. You could just do a search for the Little Wretches on Facebook, and it's facebook.com/Little Wretches. Those are the two main places to find us. And if you wanted to sample the music, we're everywhere. And any streaming service, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, any of those things. There, and in an earlier generation of the band, there's hours and hours and hours of live footage.
Cool.
Entire concerts up on YouTube.
Okay.
Back before everybody had cell phones.
Right.
And we had guys coming around with camcorders and recording our shows.
Okay. Awesome.
So it's out there for anybody who looks. The Little Wretches.
Yeah. Well, I love what you guys do. It's cool. I'm a product child of that era, so I love the connection to some of those early '60s rock and '70s punk bands, but feeling that Americana flavor drift in. So it's cool, and I wish you guys well with it. And I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us.
Oh well, I'm glad you asked. I'm looking for a way to make people aware of it, and you're helping.
Yeah,
so
good.
In your debt.
Good. Well, thank you very much. We wish you well, and hope to see you on your travels. As we were talking offline, you have an opportunity to pass through our part of the country, so maybe we'll get a chance to share a cup of coffee somewhere one day.
I'd love to.
Thanks again for tuning in to this episode of Americana Music Profiles. Find us on iTunes at Americana Music Profiles and on the internet at AmericanaRhythm.com.